You know, that's a good question. How many people are familiar with the iterable deferred? Raise your hand. No way. No one? OK. Well, we can cancel the talk, maybe? So, wait a second. Awesome. So it's going to be really interesting. Let's do that. Don't feel bad with yourself, because honestly, till very late stages of being myself as an Angular experienced developer, I have no idea what's the iterable defer. I found it just in a way where I looked for something really specific I needed. And today, that's what I'm going to talk about, the iterable defer. It's actually a core abstraction that makes Angular pretty blazing fast comparing to other web frameworks. So we're going to deep dive into it today. A word about myself before. I'm Eliran. I'm from Tel Aviv. I'm the founder of eSquare.io, which is a consulting firm, front-end consulting firm. I'm a Google developer expert for Angular, the organizer of Angular TLV, and a public speaker here and there. eSquare, my company, I called it a European top-notch startup choice. We are an Angular-oriented consulting firm, mainly in Israel and in Europe, and we help many enterprise and startup companies doing Angular, I call it the right way, and deliver fast. So if you need this kind of services, just check out our website and contact me. OK, so let's talk about the iterable defers. But before, let's understand the why. And here's the why is the performance. The first thing I learned as a front-end developer is the need of an highly performed website. Everyone these days knows that performance and stuff like customer engagement and better user experience are key part in business success. And as Angular developers, we are always worried about runtime performance, right? Take a look at this one. What is this? Beautiful. It's not that beautiful, but it's in real-life word application. Your DOM is probably look something like this. You're going to have many levels of siblings, and whenever you're going to have complex components that holds a list, and this list get updated oftenly whenever some of the entities get added or removed. And you just need one heavy UI component that rendered heavily to feel the difference in performance. Now, it mainly happens because Angular dirty check that for every leaf component, let's say that we have an event in this leaf component, in the default strategy, the whole tree is going to repaint, something that looks like that. Sorry for the bad animation. Change detection will check the all components, and when it comes to Angular, if you're expert with Angular, or even if you're not expert with Angular, the first thing you want to do is probably move to on-push strategy, right? And this is definitely a great idea, because once you're going to move to on-push strategy, and the highest you're going to put it on your tree, you're going to block the unnecessary renders of components. Now, on-push is really great. It will solve most of the problems. But is it enough? Probably no. Repainting is expensive, and sometimes you have data structure that enforcing you to have variables, iterable variables, that's checked on the same component. Also, Angular built-in directives, structural directives like ngFor, ngStyle, ngClass are really highly used by Angular developers. And this is great. We are lucky to have them. But on the other hand, we need to understand that they're repainting the component again and again. Now, we are experienced Angular developers, right? If we're using ngFor, OK, we can use the track by function, right? And here, this is a magic that I want to explain. What's happening under the hood, how Angular actually knows what's changed and what not, and how Angular actually help us to use this abstraction to be way more faster on the DOM. So get to know the iterable defer. It's an Angular core abstraction. It's a provider that allows to compare collections and produce a list of changes whenever they change, what kind of changes, what added, what removed, and even what just changed a position. Now, what's this provider and where it's come from? This is from the Angular source code. Angular actually creating, ignore this theta magic stuff. This is how the Angular team creating their own providers, not using the DI system. They define injectable where the token is iterable defers, provided in root, so you can actually just inject it from everywhere you want. And it returns a default factory that's called default iterable defer factory. Now, what this provider class has on it, it has a few methods. The first one is find, where you can actually give the iterable object itself. It gets the iterable object itself and return the factory. The other one is the create, that takes the factory and return the iterable defers. And the other one is another static method that's called extend. It's really rarely used. I will just give an example of it, for a use case for it to this one, but it's better to know it. Now, which kind of iterable defer types we have? We have the default one, we have the key value one, and we have the custom key value, whereas the difference between the key value and the custom one is the track by function. Now, honestly, this is my last slide. How much time do I have? Almost 25 minutes. Awesome. So we're going to have some fun. And part of the fun is going to be a live coding session. Tell me if I need to increase the font, or you can see. Another one, or it's good enough? People in the end can see? More? I'm blind. Let's try. OK, so what I'm going to do in the next 25 minutes where I have is to show some examples. Part of them are going to be really basic, and part of them we're going to actually create some structural directives by Angular, and to see what's the magic behind it, how they are doing it. So the first thing I want to do is just to create an iterable object. What is an iterable object? We can just have an array. So let's say that we have an array of numbers with 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now let's also declare a defer. The defer type will be iterable defer of number, and let's set it in the beginning to null. Now, I'm adding a constructor because I want to inject my iterable defer. So let's call it defers. By the way, look at the slightly difference between defer, which is my defer, and the iterable defers that I'm getting from Angular. So I'm injecting the iterable defers. By the way, this is the default one, as we discussed in the slides. So I'm injecting the iterable defer, and inside the constructor straight away, I can set my defer to this defers find, pass my deferable object, which is A. I know that I'm getting a factory, so I'm just creating my defer. OK? You know what? We don't need all this, so maybe we can expand it as well. Awesome. I just need the HTML file, and let's get rid of it. Great. Now, let's add the button. And with my button, I'm going to bind to the click event and pass the click function. Click me. Great. Let's go back to our component. And inside click, now I'm going to change my iterable object. So I'm going to take A and set it now to 1, which is exactly the same like I had before. I'm changing the position of 3, and I'm adding a new one, 4. So what I did is actually 1 hasn't changed, 3 moved to position 2, 4 added, 2 removed. Right? Pretty easy? Awesome. I'm implementing the doCheck lifecycle loop. So in every change detection cycle, I can check what's changed in my implementation. First thing, let's clear the console. So it's going to be a little more cleaner. And here, when we have the defer, we can, first of all, declare our changes object. So changes is a type, iterable, defer, iterable changes of type number, okay? And it's going to come from our defer.diff with the same object. Now, if we have changes, we can check our changes, and to see these changes as some nice method that already provided from the Angular core team. One of them is for each added item. One of them is for each moved item. And when we have removed item, previous item, etc., etc. This is how actually Angular knows what's changed. So let's see that in action. Let's implement and run for each added item. So I'm going to have a record. The record type will be iterable change record number. And let's just console log the added record. Now, if I will click on the click me button, we see that we're getting an object. Let's just a little bit expand the console. We're getting an object from the Angular core team with some interesting stuff on it. What's the current index? What's the item itself? What was the previous index? So we know that item number 4 wasn't before on the array, so the previous index is definitely null. The item itself is 4, and the current index is 2. Pretty nice, no? Now, let's add also the moved and removed. So for each moved, change this one to moved. And same goes to removed. We can see removed. Great. Now I see that I get all of them. Added item number 4, current index is 2, previous index is null. If we see the moved, so number 3 was previously in current index 1, it's a 0-based array, and now it's 1, previous index was 2, and removed, obviously current index wasn't there, but item number 2. Pretty nice. But let's do something more interesting than that. Let's first create an interface, employees, where employee has ID of type number and a name of type string. Okay? And let's create some employees. So the first employee, employee 1 of type employee, it's going to be an employee with ID number 1, and the name is going to be Eliran. Let's create another one. Employee number 2, and the name will be Martina. So let's imagine that we have an employees array that contains these both employees. Okay? Now let's create another employee, which is going to be exactly like employee number 1. Let's call it employee 3. Okay? But it's going to be exactly like number 1. Means that same object, but different instance. Okay? And on the click me event, I want to change the employees from just being number 1 and 2 to be number 3 and number 2. I actually not making any changes. I just change the instance, right? Now, let's change my iterable defer to watch our employees. So the first thing, we're changing the employees. We need to tell that this type is going to be employee type. Of course, we need to update all the other types. And also when we're comparing to employees array. Okay? Clear? Awesome. Let's click on this. And we actually getting something that I was expecting a little bit more, but this is the expected result, right? We changed two things. We added an item and we removed one item. We added the object ID1 Eliran, and we removed the same object because it's a different instance. But honestly, I expected a little bit more from Angular because we're working with ngFor. We know they have something that checked the way the object is actually created, right? We don't want to render the whole list when we just have one item added to a list. So actually, Angular do solve this issue. And you're probably familiar with it, and it's called track by. And track by can take an employee and return the employee ID. Where I define it, inside the create function, when I'm creating the factory, I can just pass the track by function. And when I do that, now I'm actually clicking. I hope you believe me. You saw this one blinks. Nothing changed. We get no changes. And this what makes Angular really fast. The applause is not for me, so for the Angular team, right? Cool. Now, with that understanding and with that understanding of the magic under the hood, let's create, and we have some time, so we can create this structural directive, one of the most used structural directive that Angular has, ngStyle, which is a pretty simple one, and you're going to be amazed how much it's simple to create it yourself, so that's what I'm going to use. To do it yourself, and let's do it together. We just create a generator directive. I can't see anything, so I hope I have no misspells. My ngStyle. I'm going to call it my ngStyle, so it's going to be a little bit different from the original ngStyle, and we're not going to be to have any conflict. So I'm calling it my ngStyle, and let's do it together. Okay? The first thing I want to do is to have our object, the object that Angular, the iterable object that Angular needs. Let's call it the same name as we have the selector. So it's going to be my ngStyle. The type is going to be an object, like we passed to ngStyle, and it's going to be the key of type string, and the value going to be string as well. Now, we're also going to define our defer. And this time, we're not going to use the default one. We're going to use the key value defer, because we're dealing with objects. So key value defer, and the type is going to be string. Well? Oh, yeah. Thank you very much. You saved my day. Now, we have a constructor, okay? Inside who was the one that fixed me? That corrected me? Thank you very much. You're probably the only one that listened to me, right? At least I know somebody is listening. Okay, so we have a constructor. Let's inject three stuff that we need. The first one we need is we know we want to set the defers, so let's first inject our defers. And this time also it's going to be not the default one, it's going to be the key value defers. Okay? We know we need to make some changes on the elements. This is a structural directive. So we also need the element ref of type element ref, of course. And the last thing we need is the renderer, because we're making changes on the DOM. So I'm going to also inject the, let's keep conventions, renderer 2. Okay, next thing we need to do is we know that we want in any cycle of change detection or something change inside with the input that we get, we want to update our defers. So we know that we have to work with inputs, but also adding a setter. And I'm going to set it as the same name as the selector, as the directive selector. So it's going to be exactly like any structural directive that you know. Here we're going to expect to get the value itself from the user, which the type is going to be exactly like the private property we created. Let's reduce this a little bit. Okay. And here inside the input, we want to do two things. The first thing we want to have is, first of all, set our iterable object to the current value we got. Now, if this is the first time and we still don't have a defer, we have to declare our defer. So I'm checking if I'm not having a defer, it's still null, okay? And also I got a value. If both of these happened, first of all, I want to set my defers. So I will take the defers, find with our iterable object, and just create it. All right? So far? Let's implement toCheck. So again, in every life cycle of change detection, we will make our changes. First of all, we're checking if we have our defer, if this defer. If we have this defer, we can set the changes. So const changes will be, now again, it's not going to be the iterable defer changes. It's another type called key value. Key value changes string any. Okay? And we're going to get it from setting the defer, from getting the defer diff with the iterable object. Okay? Now, we have the changes object. We can check if we have changes, we're going to apply our changes on the DOM. So let's keep that as a placeholder for a second. Apply changes, changes. And here, let's create another helper function, private setStyle, that can get the name and the unit as one string, and also the value as a string. And first of all, I want to destruct the name and the unit. We're actually supporting all type of conventions by Angular. You know, you can just pass to ngStyle the name and the unit together, so we have to also support that. The name and the unit, string, and name and unit, just split it with dot. Now, we can set the value to be, if we have value, and we also have a unit, so we just want to concat them, where the value goes first and the unit goes second, unit. And otherwise, it's going to be just the value. And here, we can just use the renderer to set the style with our native element, element ref dot native element with the name and the value. Value. Cool? Is it clear? Now, we can make the changes. How exactly? We're going to take the changes that we have, iterate for each added item. We know that we have here a record. The record is going to be of type key value change record, string any. And here we're just going to use our private method, the setStyle method. This setStyle, we know that on the record we have two things. First of all, we're going to have a record dot key, and the other one is record dot current value. Okay? We also need to do the same exact thing for every changed item. So for each changed item. And when some of the values will be removed, we just want to set it to null. Take the key and reset it to null. OK? That's it. We finished. We have our ngStyle. Let's test it. So let's go to our app module first. Declare our my shiny ngStyle, my ngStyle directive. OK? And I can go to app component HTML. And let's my ngStyle. As an input. And let's pass an object with, let's say, the color is going to be green. Yeah! And the same goes if I'm going to remove it. You will see that we have no styles. OK? Let's go back to last one slide to summarize it. You know what? I have a little bit more time, so I'm just going to touch it as a bonus section. There is a way to improve a little bit ngFor. If you're interested, that's a blog post that Minko Getchev wrote a few years ago. I hope that everybody here is familiar with Minko, and if not, that's the right time to follow him. The idea behind it is, if you ask yourself what's the runtime complexity of iterable, the default iterable defer is O of n, which makes sense, because if you want to know what's changed on your collection, you have to run over the whole collection. Now, with a small difference of immutability and computer science tricks, you can change your collection data structure to be a linked list and move the logic of what has been changed from the collection, from the iterable defer to the collection itself. Means that every item going to hold exactly what was the previous one and what's the current value. And with that, you actually can reduce your complexity, runtime complexity to O of 1. And with that, you can create your custom defers and extend the default defer. We have no time to go over the slides of the code, so I will share it anyway, all the slides, and also just check Minko Getchev's blog. It's pretty amazing to see what you can do with it. And before we go, let's a quick summary. We learned what are the iterable defer and why they are super important for Angular to be blazing fast in runtime. We saw how stuff that looks pretty complex, like ngStyle. I'm not sure if any of you ever opened the source code of ngStyle and thought to yourself, oh my God, is it really that easy to understand what's happening there once you understand the iterable defer? And I'm not really sure that, but we learned that we can extend and create our custom iterable defer and even improve the ngFor by using some computer science techniques. Before I go, that's my handle on Twitter, my website, my personal website where I'm publishing some blog posts and videos, and my company website. Feel comfortable with reaching out to me or speaking with me at the break. Enjoy your lunch, and thank you very much.